Hey, Eliza,
Hey, how's it going?
how are you?
I'm okay. How are you doing?
I'm good. The last, I think 2 weeks ago, John Voquette was on,
Mhm.
and your name kept coming up because I was asking about the end of the school year and all this. And I guess our listeners probably already are familiar with your name, but I'm happy to have them finally meet you. Why don't you
Oh,
introduce yourself?
all right. Well, I'm Eliza Hallabeck. I'm the education reporter here at the Newtown Bee. And yeah, the end of the school year is certainly, I think, a very exciting time, specifically this year. The school board is just this week was talking to their student representatives from the high school and prom and graduation. There are contingencies, of course, just in case things don't go well, but they are planned and they're going to look differently this year. But that different is luckily, I think, a happier look than it was last year, because last year's different was very different.
Driving around town and seeing the signs, class of 2020, and my wife and I would just say, "Wow, what a tough situation." There's no way to know how you'll get through it, and if this is your kid's opportunity to celebrate and to mark this point in their life. There's really no roadmap for how you get through something like last year. This year, they had a better idea, right?
They do, yeah. And even last year, I know what you're talking about, seeing those signs around town, you know, being excited for the class of 2020, but not knowing what to do. They still did a lot of things. At the elementary level, they did car parades. And at the high school, they also eventually had a car parade too. And everyone was ecstatic. I was taking photos of each family in their car with their graduate. They were just beaming. You could see it. So even last year, and they did have a graduation last year. It was just in the parking lot at the high school, and individual spacing. Everything was timed out and over a long period of time. But this year, it's looking like it's going to be at the high school again, but more gathered. So I'm expecting to see those smiles again for sure, and not just in individual cars this time.
Because I'm
But
just thinking how a year ago we had to choose not just for education but anything. One parent could go in with a child into the doctor's office. One, I think are we getting a little closer to where family could be
it's
together
still,
and
yeah, it's still being limited. Either they are dividing the class up into two for the high school specifically, so that they can have, I believe, two parents with them or guardians. So it's more than one,
yeah,
but yeah, we're getting there.
having to decide which parent gets to do stuff is not easy. Now
No,
I
no.
got to do soccer, so I was excited with my daughter. But tell us a little bit more about what the job of the education reporter at the Newtown Bee is. And really, we've talked so much with Nancy and with John on the air about how fortunate we are in town to have the Newtown Bee. In northern Westchester, where I started radio 20 some odd years ago, there was a great weekly called the Patent Trader, but it's been gone for a very long time. And that's the case for a lot of newspapers like the Newtown Bee. Yet you guys are still here doing yeoman's work, and I'm so happy that you are. So, the first question is a little bit more about your job, and B, how thrilled are you that there is something like the Newtown Bee?
Oh, I am. I'm going to go with B first, because I am very, very thrilled that the Newtown Bee is still here, and we're still hanging on, and my coworkers are being awesome. And I am also thrilled that I have my job specifically as an education reporter. There really aren't that many education reporters anywhere, so I'm thrilled that the position exists. And I think other newspapers should definitely have education reporters. In my mind, I know. I clearly think this, but to me, education is one of the things that should be reported on all of the time. If students aren't being educated to a proper degree, that's going to affect years upon years of our lives. So I would love for more newspapers to have a position like this that the Newtown Bee does. As my job, I cover the Board of Education meetings. I think in my near 13 years here, I've only missed like 6 meetings in 13 years due to vacations. So, Board of Education meetings back Pre-COVID, I would also cover a lot of events in the schools. I really miss those. And I am 100% looking forward to seeing students at assemblies, doing historical biography presentations that are normally happening this time of year, science projects. I just love going into the schools and covering things that students are reading and learning, and just being there to provide that in the paper so that everyone else can see it too.
So is like September like Super Bowl time for an education reporter? Do you start getting amped up around Labor Day?
I normally joke that the end of the school year typically is, because I have weeks upon weeks where I just sometimes can't remember what I'm doing tomorrow because I have too many things I'm doing today and my calendar is just so full. September, yes, I get excited for them to return, but it's not quite as hectic yet. So the Super Bowl for me is really the end of the school year, typically right now. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And we got you in this time. Thank you for making time for us. The importance of how well the school systems run, it reverberates. I mean, let's face it, the value of our homes, everything. It is the foundation of any town that works or doesn't work, right?
For sure. Just seeing all of those faces, like a lot of times my work sometimes can be a lot of photo heavy, because just seeing it in action is sometimes more impressive than reading it.
And the photos that's one of the things that both Nancy and John have pointed out is a reason why you want to pick up a copy, right, of as my mom calls it, the big newspaper.
Yes.
It's a great big paper. Talk to us a little bit about why people want to still grab that tangible copy. There's more in there, right?
Oh, there's way more in the Newtown Bee's print edition than we put online. Like the photos, we have photo packages, all of our stories, we put all of our stories in print. We limit some of what goes online, even what's shared on social media. And speaking of students, one of the things we try to remind students is the newspaper is still printed in a broadsheet format, which is why it's so wide, right? And you aren't going to see those around anywhere else. We're very specific. It's a traditional format. And it really is fun just opening up this wide broadsheet and seeing everything we put together. It's amazing to me every week that we fill as much as we do. And my coworkers really go out of the park every week to do it. So it is amazing. This week we have a lot of stuff in the paper.
Okay, all right. So give us, that's one of the jobs of the people who call in weekly here. Tell the WPKN listeners what they could expect to read about. I picked my copy up, by the way, at the Big Y on Friday. So
that's a great place to pick it up. Well, this week we have to remember that the referendum's coming up. We're looking at a $43 million roughly municipal budget and a $79 million school budget that voters are being asked to vote on. And there are also 3 other capital bonding authorizations that they're going to be looking at. There's a boiler and LED lights for Reed Intermediate School, and a $3.7 million St. Hook Permanent Memorial is on there. And then the $5 million for emergency radio commissions upgrades.
Those are 3 items that we've paid particular attention to. The last one that you mentioned is, if you think about it, having the ability to communicate effectively in an emergency situation, it's hard to put a price tag on that. I mean,
it really is.
If you can't relay that information, it's bad news for all parties involved. So anything else in there that we should look at? Because sometimes with budgets, people hear numbers and it's hard to connect it to what it actually translates to in their daily lives.
That's true. And I do know that going through the process, because for me, this process starts in January. So this is months after I've already been reporting about specifically the school budget for months upon months, and watching commission after commission, board after board member, looking at all of the details. I can tell you that these are looked at, and I will every year. I'm very curious to see how the voters are going to vote. So,
and Tuesday, how have you been surprised by how voters vote in town
over the years? I have to say yes. It's always a little bit of a surprise to me, especially for the years when you don't hear a lot from voters before the referendum. I never know how to read that situation. This year, I think we've heard a lot. I've personally heard some support for the permanent memorial. I haven't heard too much about the boiler and LED lighting at Reed, but I have to imagine, upgrades like that affect the budget year after year. LED lights do decrease the cost. So we'll see what voters seem to think.
How do you communicate with people in town, especially now?
Well, I guess how everyone else is communicating with email mostly, right?
Yeah.
Email and phones. It is a little weird. I was just thinking that my reporter's notebook normally gets filled one a week, and it's way less now because I'm typing so much more.
I like that you have a notebook?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a staple.
I like that. What about, you mentioned how many meetings you go to, and I used to cover Board of Selectmen meetings and things like that. And first of all, thank you for doing that, because it's not the easiest thing to do sometimes to sit through. But how is that? How are the dynamics doing that via Zoom?
Well, luckily, I'm not the only one covering meetings. My coworkers, John Bouquet, Alyssa Silber, Shannon Hicks, so we all cover meetings. And
specifically the Board of Ed meetings.
Yes, and the dynamics, I have to say, are a little wonky, but I think everyone's getting everything under control with the virtual meetings. There isn't too much talking over each other that I can notice. There isn't too much, hey, can you hear me anymore? That seems to have, everyone seems to have a little bit more of a handle, but I am looking forward to being in person again for meetings, which, believe me, is a surprise.
Eliza, I used to cover Bridgeport Board of Ed meetings, and these literally, sometimes the police would be called. I'm not joking. So, maybe it's a better thing. Maybe it's better that it's virtual now. We're coming to the end of the school year, which you said is a very big deal for you. Talk to us about getting prepared for the summer and into next year. I know it's not too early to start thinking about that.
I haven't heard too many presentations yet about what next year is going to look like. We're still, the district is still really focusing on the end of the school year right now. Vaccinations being rolled out. In fact, the student representatives just spoke this week about how students are reacting to getting their vaccinations. And there hasn't been a lot of hesitation. One of them said that a lot of their friends seem to be telling them day after day that they're all getting their vaccinations now that it's 16 plus. And I think there's a real excitement for the students about actually being able to be in person, and that being a help to making that possible for graduation and prom and things like that. So as soon as the school year's over, I'm sure they will be more focused on next year. But right now, I think it's still a focus of just making sure everyone is continuing to follow safety procedures, making sure everything is safe for students.
That's a story right there. I didn't even think about that, about how people in that age range perceive the vaccine. And I guess I'm not surprised to hear that there's less hesitation. When do you suspect, or are there numbers on how many of them are getting vaccinated?
Not off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Well, there you go. That I'm going to start. I'm going to. That'll be a story we'll do on WPCAN. What else is in the Newtown Bee this week?
Well, we have an update on the Charter Revision Commission. They are hoping to have their recommendation by July, and John Bouquet's been covering that really thoroughly and wonderfully. So I'm going to be following along that. And my coworker Alyssa Silber has a fascinating story about she's doing a series about coexisting with animals and wildlife. And this week she focuses on bears. Her last one was on opossums, so people should really check that out. And Shannon Hicks, our other associate editor, along with John Bouquet, she covered a lightning strike that caused a home fire in Sandy Hook this week. And it caused a fire, but no one was injured. So luckily that was good. Good outcome. Hopefully everything's okay with the fire otherwise. And then, of course, John Bouquet's been covering our COVID updates at the state level and locally. And there are still upticks for deaths, but restrictions are being lifted. So there's a bit of good news and sad news there still. And Newtown did receive a Democracy Cup that John Bouquet covered this week too for our 2020 turnout. We had a better than 90% percentage rate for voting in 2020.
What is it?
Amazing.
A Democracy Cup? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's a state awarded, just recognizing that the town had an amazing turnout for voting, which I personally am very excited to see what that means for this upcoming referendum. Are people going to be thrilled and excited? It was a real reflection that we earned this on our Newtown registrars of voters, Lorraine Frampton and Erica Canfield, and the town clerk, Debbie Aurelia Halstead, and the town voters for showing up. So I'm excited to see what they'll do for the referendum.
Yeah. Well, I will rely on you to tell me. And as we rely on the Newtown Bee for a lot of our local news on WPKN, real quick, back to what you do. Newtown obviously is impacted by what happens up in Hartford. Do you communicate with the state? How do you get news from the state capitol as it impacts education in town?
I follow a lot. Stories myself. Yeah.
So when you see a story and you say that this may have an impact, and
we get a lot of updates. John Boquette gets a lot of updates too, because he covers so much of the state level for his reporting. And we all just work to keep each other informed. We follow a lot of information and reach out to when we need to for the state level. But
do people call you? I'm assuming a lot of people in town know that you're a reporter. Do people come to you with stories?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I love when people come to me for stories. It really changes what I could think about. We need people to come to us for stories because I'm limited on my imagination, I admit. If someone has an idea, I might not have thought about it already. So if like your idea for looking at how students are responding, like even though I covered it, that's still a great idea that I didn't think about. So it's wonderful when people reach out to us for stories, and I highly encourage that.
There's a high level of interaction with the paper. I could tell you that. I was fortunate enough to be featured as a snapshot, and my neighbors saw it.
Yeah, that is a fantastic section of our paper that my coworker
it really is a cool paper, and you guys do a great job. And I'm so happy that you took the time to join us, and I hope that you'll come back again. I think that we're very fortunate to have you guys in town.
Thank you. Right back at you.
Yeah.